Okay, thank you all for coming back so promptly. We just let a few people find their way back. Okay, I wasn't here yesterday, but I'm told that the session went very well, and hopefully you guys all know much better than me how this works. But the basic plan is you have a little outline from me for a few minutes, and then on your tables, you'll have about 10 minutes to look at these questions on the right. You can pick one of them, or all of them, or a few of them, or whatever you fancy. There is paper and post-it notes on the table. We have elected a leader for you on every table, except for the two tables at the back where Owen is standing. You have to elect your own leaders, I'm afraid. Oh, yeah, that was quick. And then once we come back at about 12:15, I'll just go around and try and call out the rooms or call out the tables, or you can just volunteer, and we'll try and get through here. I will try really hard to get us done by 12:50, because then we're on to lunch. Okay, any questions? Everyone know what we're doing?
David, just to clarify, it's 12 to 12:50 on the tables, then you being able to get at 12:50 till 1 o'clock to do the gathering together.
Oh, wow, okay.
We have a long time discussing the tables.
So this sounds even better for me. I only got like 10 minutes work to do at the end now. So, okay, brilliant. So yeah, you guys are on your own till like 12:50, and then I'll try and bring it back to a room at 12:50. Thank you very much. Okay, any more questions? If not, then I would suggest you start and just pick a question or two to try and work out what you want to do. Okay, hi everybody. I think we're just about at 10:02, so if we can get you back in the room. Okay, so I think this is an open format. We do have a few people online, so when your table is talking, if you can use the mic just to help them, they'll be able to hear as well. So anybody like to start? Any of the tables want to volunteer?
I've got a mic. Not sure if it works though. We had a lot of interesting discussions, and I think the thing that I took away from it was that opening up more broader kind of sessions, accessing people rather than digital systems, it really gives academics the chance to put their foot in the door and open up some more specific discussion. So if as the IT team we ran something very general, you know, how to access the HPC systems and get the most out of them, they can kind of come in with more specific questions instead of using the ticketing system or just giving us a message on Teams. So that's what we really took from it. We flipped the question on its head. Rather than people having access to digital systems and having problems there, it's more about people having problems accessing people.
And did you come to a conclusion on how to fix it?
It's about one of those more broader sessions, right? Yeah, it's about running those more broader sessions and giving people the opportunity to speak to you. That was kind of our conclusion about how we can kind of make a dent in fixing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we talked a lot about many things. We sort of picked up on new users, how they've changed. We picked the last 5 years. There's a higher expectation of the technology and the platforms, partly through smartphone tablets being just so easy and the command line being not so easy. So we've got an influx of machine learning users using Python who seem to be a particular breed, may not have a deep background in writing software, but have learned how to do, you know, Jupyter Notebook, that kind of thing, and have an expectation that that environment is going to be made available to them. Can I have Google Colab but bigger, please? Or not for needing a credit card. And also non-traditional domains. And sort of branching off this, without going too far, was around access to new stuff that's too new to have any kind of support. So we don't even know how these things work or how you deploy them or how you're supposed to properly use them. So the researchers can't have an expectation that we are experts on something that was published on GitHub 2 weeks ago. And a sort of link to that was poor documentation. And do we make documentation of code that we produce, if we are also research software engineers, part of our definition of done? How do we make that code be good? So we had an example of application specialists rather than just more RSEs. So an application specialist who would control the quality of documentation and make it accessible. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much. I know on our table we had quite a long conversation around software, and we tried not to get into the what is your favorite programming language, but yeah.
We sort of spent a lot of time looking at sort of the perspective of the new user and how they might engage with DRI. And the first problem we identified with that was actually finding DRI, being aware of DRI. How do we communicate to users that these resources exist? How do we get them to those sessions if they're not aware of those sessions? And then once they're aware of DRI, how do we make the DRI relevant for them? How do we show the social scientists what we can do? How do we show the biologists what they can do? Some of these fields are a lot easier to show what they can do because there are a lot of examples that already exist. Maybe we need to be writing more case studies. Maybe we need to think about how we write case studies to make it more obvious for new users how these tools can benefit them, how they can relate to their research. Another barrier we potentially identified is research has a lot of momentum behind it. A lot of research that's been running for 10, 20, 30 years. Shifting onto DRI might actually be a really big jump for that. And so if you are a new postdoc on a new project, how do we arm those postdocs with the tools to convince their supervisors that DRI is the right thing for their project? Maybe they really want to use it, but the supervisor says no. And how do we make that available? We need to, for going forwards, we really need to get these ECRs, these postdocs, these PhDs on board. Yeah, I think I'll leave it with that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So just to add to the new users question, I think we picked up, sorry Sam, we picked up a lot of the same issues. One that hasn't been mentioned yet is the reluctance of new users to read long, lengthy explanatory docs. And 30-page user guides don't get read. And instead, they don't like to use things like Google to find the answer. They like to use ChatGPT and take a nice summary of the answer to give them exactly what they want, and they use it without any validation or checking it's sane. So that's something to be aware of. We also spent some time discussing the barriers to DRI. One of the main barriers was awareness. People aren't aware of what's out there and how they access it. When they do access it, they might find that the access isn't equal, that there's some sites in the UK that have access to facilities that other sites don't have access to. Even though they might have the right funding, they might have a geographical restriction. And the funding gives rise to the cost. Sometimes DRI services come with a cost, either to the institution, in which case they might be a bit less keen to advertise it widely, or to the individual, in which case they need to make sure it's included in their grant costs. And so it'd be great if, as part of the grant submission process, we could put some hooks in there to make sure that these extra costs are included, as well as things like data management plans, put those things there as part of the submission process. We also talked about the dangers of cloud and what happens to cloud if it's done in a private account when that user leaves the institution. Where do those things go? So that's also another risk that we discussed.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to jump to online, Sam.
Yep, so I joined the online session. I think leading from what Matt said about ChatGPT, that we discussed a lot about how both ourselves and the kind of wider DRI environment is really removing a lot of the barriers that were there before. We've got much easier kind of GUI access, so graphical interfaces that really enable researchers to engage with a lot of things like Git without needing to get into the sort of code side of things. And that's great, but then we've got the kind of counter to that, then we've got a lot of drivers to add barriers in response to that. So we've got the kind of big security aspect, the implication of users on performance systems that aren't kind of knowledgeable about the kind of speed of their code and things like that. We talked about how we can engage with those things, so both kind of creating barriers and reducing friction through professions like platform engineers, and we've talked about how those have been kind of successful in some sense, that they're starting to produce more better results, but there are still difficulties in doing that. One of the, just picking up, one of the challenges was the idea of, as DRI professionals, we often want super user privileges. This is more not necessarily an end user kind of issue, but then this is our own issue of accessing DRI tech that can often be quite quite an issue. I think that probably covers a lot of what we said.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So of course we covered many of what's already been said. I'll try and add some little extra bits. We talked a bit about this idea of, people don't want to lose access to their pseudo. They want to stay in their cozy laptop environment, and we want to sort of tease them away slowly from that. And that is as much about the, being taught how to deal with the social realities of working with a shared computer resource rather than something of your own. It's not necessarily one of high performance so much as cultures of shared use of various different facilities, and also helping them believe that they could actually produce something worth sharing, which I think is also really important as well. Not unrelated to that, we talked, and these are more concrete suggestions or comments, the value of these low friction ways of accessing, for example, HPC, really, really important to set aside some resource from the very beginning to have this potential interactive mode of interacting with whatever infrastructure it is, but to recognize that that's not the end goal. You put people into the, I think the word used was a honeypot, right? We make it attractive for that small cohort of users, then they recognize that that's not the only way to do it, and they either graduate or migrate to a different and more sustainable, potentially, way of working with the infrastructure. It's linked to that idea of losing access to your cozy environment. And then finally, we talked a bit about discoverability, same challenges, people not knowing exactly what's out there, what training they need. It would be worth, people work in institutions where a cohort of researchers is given a set of pointers towards a set of resources. This is where you learn to do your bibliography. This is where you learn to conduct searches in the library catalog. We don't see the kinds of skills that are probably cross-cutting, that are required to access the kind of DRIs that we're interested in, appearing in those kinds of documents and those kinds of guidance. And it would be interesting to think about what's needed in that setting. So, for example, the research development framework or any of these development frameworks, to see concrete enough skills in there that are starting to shape these documents that the people that we serve and interact with are able to kind of action, rather than just say, oh, you should be good at digital skills or literacy in some general sense, but rather be good at digital skills in a sense, or competencies to access the really cool stuff that you could be doing.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more table. So,
well, as I've got the microphone. On our table, we started by discussing some of the barriers to entering the HPC and DRI worlds, and quickly realised that between our table, we've got a lot of different job titles, a lot of different experience. And to all of us, we sort of have our one passionate, here's the barrier that we deal with. And actually, during a lot of the panel discussions, there's so many training courses for individual barriers. If you want to know about legal stuff or ethics or compute or file stores, there's all this training available, and yet to a researcher, well, why aren't they doing any of it? Actually, the challenge is, how do you sort of breadcrumb your users into it to go, look, here's the bits that's relevant to you. What's your priorities? How can we support that? Rather than me as a software engineer going, here's what I want to work on, align to me or you don't get help. And so trying to re-engineer some of our structures and our teaching support to be more user-centric rather than what us as technical professionals want to do in our role was sort of where we landed with that discussion and what the trajectory for the future looks like.
okay, thank you very much, everybody. I hope that was a really useful discussion on your tables. We're breaking for lunch now, and I think we're back in here at 2 o'clock.